Welcome to the Japan Business Show. My name is Eric Ahorner, and today I am joined by Oliver Witte. Oliver is a marketing and communications manager at Hioki, a Japanese company or manufacturing company for electric measuring equipment in Germany. Thank you for joining me today, Oliver.
Thanks for having me. Hello.
So to start it off, I'm curious about your background, how you started your interest in Japan, and what has led you to becoming a marketing and communications manager at a Japanese company.
Yes. So, when I started or when I decided what to study, I wanted to do something, of course, that has a commercial or a good career outlook for me. So I decided to go for studying economics and management. But on the other hand, I'm not, I must say, maybe it's not the typical career path. And I kind of wanted to connect this with a personal interest, which I had in Japan from a more cultural background, like the ancient Japan and that part, and some private things really. And by combining that cultural area of Japan with the economical management studies, that just seemed to be the right thing for me. So I chose the course of study that I found in Bremen. And that basically led the way to work in Japan and to work within the Japanese economical environment.
Mm-hmm. And your initial spark of interest in the Japanese culture, how did that start?
It is simply it's one of the typical entries, I think, into Japanese culture. For me, it's martial arts. Martial arts was the one point. I was doing karate already for more than 10 years. And with that, especially outside of Japan, there's a lot of reading involved with that. You read about some old legends of Japan, about the Budo culture, and what is the values behind that. And it's more than just a sport. It's really something that you try to find find more value in. And yes, so that was the starting point, and then also some kind of maybe a good perception of language also. So like having that on top of this, the cultural part and the language part would be just the right way to combine it with the career and with what I do for a living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very interesting. And how did you get started in the Japanese business environment? Did you start right away working for a Japanese company, or what's your career path?
The career path. So yes. So before the Japanese studies, I started I was kind of trying to get my direction, and tried different things here in Germany. But my first career path, now connecting to my current position, really started in Japan. And that was when I was my first stay over in Japan, where I continued my business studies and studies of Japanese in university, but also then my first internship at Yamaha Corporation Hamamatsu. This is where it started, and that was deliberately I chose this purely a Japanese environment. I had the choice between going to Tokyo and keeping it in an international way, but my path was really my choice was really to have a complete Japanese environment, to be able to understand that with the good and the bad things, with the difficult and less difficult things that you can find there. And yes, that's where it started. And it was actually not really marketing. I started off because it was an internship. There was not so much to choose for me. It was more personnel and logistics. But my first employment in Tokyo a few years later was in marketing. And this is what I've been working for the last 16 years, I think. Yeah.
Very interesting. So you consciously decided to go the maybe more challenging path and not dive into a corporate environment that had international exposure, but go to Yamaha, although Yamaha is a very international company, but I understand at the headquarters of Yamaha, I assume in a division that didn't have that much international exposure to get the full Japanese immersion experiences. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I heard the hearsay was that it's perhaps difficult for a manufacturer working directly in a manufacturer headquarter, not at the Tokyo offices. And I wanted to find out myself, but I also, I'll say, the one goal was also not so much of a career goal, but really also to language-wise, to really find the environment where I must get my things together in regards to Japanese reading, Japanese conversation all over. And that is language, but also the communication, meaning like how to communicate.
And when you were in that environment, did you have the chance to use English, or were you kind of forced to improve your Japanese?
Yeah, absolutely. It was no, English was, I don't know, less than 5%, definitely. So it was every once in a while I was called over to check an email or to some English presentation was done for me. But really everything connected to whether it's admin part or work-related content, everything was in Japanese. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so you already talked about the business environment being challenging, and that it obviously wasn't the easiest path that you chose. Tell us a bit more about what challenges you've encountered, not only at Yamaha, but at the different Japanese businesses or business environments that you've been working in.
Yeah, so starting off with Yamaha, I mean, you come to a company and Japanese companies are not set up or to accommodate an intern really. So an intern is something, whether you start in a company and still with this philosophy of long-term relations or long-term employment at one employer, especially for the big companies, you have somebody new and you invest in this person, and maybe not, let's say, not on a short scale, but on a mid to long-term scale. And you would invest in this person to build this up, like after university, to build this up to become a fully, to become a specialist, maybe over time in one certain area. For an intern, which is only there for like 6 to 12 months, something like that. There's no way, like, what do we do with them? I was more treated like a guest. So there's not very much to do. Like, please sit down and read about this, learn about this. Hey, we visit the facility there, we visit the manufacturing site there. So there's nothing really to do, which for me, again, was a good opportunity to take a look around. Okay. But not so much business-wise to develop. And later on, the challenges there were to find really the right, to write a distinctive way to communicate. To who am I talking to? How direct can I say out things? Because also before in Yamaha, when I say things directly, I sometimes feel, or I felt from the reaction around me, that it was not really adequate to make this straight comment. So those were, I think, the difficulties, and seniority and long-term employment is still a high value. Although if you ask people, no, it really depends on what he can do, and that may be the case. But if you join a company and you are less than 2 years in the company, it is sometimes very difficult to talk to the guys or the persons who are there for 5 years or more, because they think, hey, what do you know? Being a freshman, in my eyes, that is sometimes a difficult way to find your standing there.
Very interesting point. And was that also the case in the other Japanese companies you've been working in?
Yeah. I think later on it was when I was introduced. I had a good opportunity with a very international, or let's say German president for my first steady employment in marketing in Tokyo, which was an exceptional situation. This was a gentleman who was living in Japan already for 30 years or so, for a long time, and he built up this enterprise by himself. And so he introduced me to some of the departments as additional. At this time, I was assistant manager and was supposed to help several certain areas. But it was really, I was not really welcomed as like, hey, all right, let's do things together. It was more like, all right, now tell me what you can bring to the table. It was quite a rough welcome, I must say. And the more Japanese, the more difficult it is. And later on, when I changed a job, and was working in a more international environment, I really felt that you still had there was room to have a special position, let's say, for a foreigner in a Japanese organization, but with that room, you were able to talk more straightforward, and yeah, you have a special position. You would not be in conflict with that Japanese standing or hierarchy that is there, and that would make it a bit easier, I would say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And have your colleagues always been Japanese only in all the business environments that you've been working in?
Yeah, for the first 5-6 years, yes, and then after I changed jobs for the last what was it, like 8 years, I was there. It was a mixed environment. Still, let's say 98% Japanese, but there was a good amount of a handful of foreigners I was working with overseas subsidiaries and a lot of overseas projects. So from a person who deals with overseas companies towards domestic business, it changed to deal with with Toyota business at that time, with like Japanese companies towards outside of Japan, and that angle, that different direction, and that different environment changed quite a bit.
I understand. And so we talked about the challenges now that you had in the Japanese business environment.
Yeah.
And we're both originally from Germany, and we have experience in German business environments, and you're currently working for Hioki in Germany.
Yes. Yeah.
What would you say are the three main differences in working style between Japanese and Germans?
Yes. Well, I don't know if I come exactly to 3 points, but definitely, I mean, when I feel the differences much stronger now that I'm working in Germany. Because as you imagine, like from I said, if you have like 98 or more % of Japanese environment and a few foreigners, certainly there are certain differences, different approaches. But if you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do, and so that's what I did for most of the time when I was in Japan. Now in Germany here, the work style is very openly often like you bring up a paper, you stick to the paper. Once your signature is there, it is the law. It is like that, and while we know about Japanese culture that the administration part and sticking to the rules is also a very important factor in the Japanese culture, I feel that it is much more there's more room, there's more vagueness in the Japanese decisions there. So the Japanese decisions are also defined to very much to the detail, but the execution and implementation sometimes is a bit vague. And I find that this is it's more challenging here. There's more the numbers and the hard facts are taken much more seriously here in Germany. And therefore also, let's say, the challenges overall are a bit. I feel it was more stricter here.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. You would say that the KPIs or key performance indicators are taken more seriously in Germany than in Japan. Is that correct?
That's what I see. Of course, I mean, if you're working in sales, which I never did, especially my first employment in Tokyo, there was direct sales involved. Of course, the sales guys were measured with numbers. That was pretty clear. But everything around that, and if that's more indirect, if you're more on a corporate side, it's definitely more challenging and stricter on the European side, I would say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I assume this vagueness that is there sometimes is for German colleagues a bit confusing when they try to stick to certain, let's say, KPI guidelines or whatever, and they are not taken into the same account by Japanese colleagues as they are taken into account by German colleagues.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one thing, and also I really think that there's for Japanese culture, including Japanese working culture, I see always some ambiguity or some. You have two sides to it. On the one hand, we know Japan also as being a propelling force, and at least has been through the 90s, for technology, for high tech, for new innovations, for things like that, for the adoption of technology, for sometimes in European environments or in Germany. I know that for myself, even I'm a bit, let's see how good this technology is, and then I'm working with it. On the other hand, you would see, for example, taking over project management tools instead of working with an Excel sheet. That seems for many Japanese cultures, traditional companies, as a big step, which still takes some time, I think, for a lot of companies. Yeah.
You mentioned a very interesting point, and I think I have to or share the same experience, that in the past, working with Excel sheets is something that is really ingrained in Japanese business culture. I think in my 10 years working for a Japanese construction machines company, I have really become a very, well, let's say more than an expert in working with Excel, I have to admit. But I can't really remember that we have implemented any software that could have facilitated a lot of the processes that we managed with spreadsheets with 500 different tabs. So that is something that I absolutely do understand.
Yeah. So coming back to counting up some differences, I think really, although I may serve a certain stereotype, I do serve a stereotype here, but efficiency in Germany, in the German work environment, is really something that my German colleagues and the German environment is requesting and continuously requesting. It's not something that is only on paper. It has to be brought to the table. It has to be it has to be performed. That is really there's no way around that. There's no discussion. We decided that KPI is set, that procedure is set, we stick to it, we do that. Yeah.
So besides the efficiency aspect and also the devotion to Excel sheets and spreadsheets,
yes,
what else had you wished you had known before starting working in a Japanese company?
Yes, so I think it's really I wish now that I had been in the beginning also a bit more demanding and a bit more going into expressing the opinion and the state and arguing stronger in the case of what I was thinking I wanted to bring to the table. But I was for a long time in the beginning period was more of observing and reacting also. Having said that, I think also that on the other hand, this long years of observing and living and experiencing the Japanese, how decisions are made, decision-making processes, also I think gave me now the capability to be able to decide when I can bring out a point strongly, or when I just hold back and bring it forth in a more diplomatic way. So on the one hand, yes, I wish I would have just had a stronger impact and say things in a stronger and more emphasized way. But I also think, would it really been possible, or would I just kicked myself, out of the conversation at that point?
Interesting, yeah. You briefly touched on the decision process in Japanese companies.
Yeah.
Are you currently using a ringi seido or a circular letter to make decisions in your company?
Yes, because the company is set up, we have it's partly owned, or the management is partly in Japan, so that includes, of course, so the decision taking for the big decisions includes managers on the Japanese side as well. So yes.
Okay, I understand. And is it now, everybody's talking about the digital transformation of Japan, that Japan has been well, this third largest economy of the world, and
Yeah.
I would say in digital technology, one of the leading countries as well.
Mm.
But still, the usage of paper, I think it is still one of the highest in business compared to even second or third world countries sometimes.
Mm.
For example, fax machines are still frequently used. Is there a digital transformation in your business that you can see in terms of the ringgit or the circular letter being moved to email, or is it still everything on paper?
No, the ring you said, especially when you consider, of course, the communication between Japan and Europe, it is digitalized by now. So that is in place. But yes, let's say it is in place. But it's still there's still Excel sheets involved. Let me tell you that.
I understand. So, but you're not really using the fax machine, and you, at
No,
least.
no, 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 no. I haven't seen any fax coming in.
Okay, all right.
We have even gone to, I mean, especially for the German part, I speak for us here. We build up a European cultured organization here. The Hioki branch has been the Hioki European subsidiary has been established in 2017, so pretty young still, and
Okay.
we definitely want to build it up in a European way. I wouldn't say a German way, but definitely a European way and not Japanese way. The Japanese, we benefit, of course, of having such a big Japanese company or precision electronics measurement maker in the background, but the corporate culture and the procedures and the structures we want to set up in a European way.
Understand.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a bit about your role and what you think has made you successful in working for Japanese companies.
Yes.
Just let me ask you, so what do you think would be a skill that is necessary if you want to be successful in Japanese business environments out of all the experience that you've made over the past 15 plus years?
Yes. I think it's really understanding the communication. That is really the number one thing. So knowing your trade, having your specific knowledge, that is definitely one where that always brings you the respect. And even if you did not start in a Japanese company or like 20 years ago, brings you the respect and the standing in the company. But really the communication. How do I bring forth my point? How do I structure this? And knowing when I should take the lead, when I should, allow for other people's opinions. So this group decision is really a very, very important, process for decision taking. And so to respect that, to go into that is really an important part. I think that I spend a lot of time taking a look. How can I bring myself in there? And because of that, I also think that my work was valued because I was considered as a person who I could bring something to the table when it was required and not just shouting something into the room.
I understand, and I'm curious to hear what you think about the next question.
Okay.
What advantages and what disadvantages does it have to be a Japanese-speaking foreigner at a Japanese company outside of Japan?
Very good question. Well, definitely the obvious advantage is that I feel that there's still a like a barrier. If somebody speaks only English, like people it's difficult for them to talk to you. So if you speak fluent Japanese, any person, never mind his position or his or her position in the company, it would be easier for them to talk to you. So that makes it easy, and also for you to just to address certain topics. So you would be more involved, definitely. Mm-hmm. So Japanese speaking is very good, but what I would probably do also differently, I would not would not do anything 100% work in Japanese as I did for a certain period of my career. I would really say that I'm more efficient and I'm more feeling well working with English and German and that area. So, and that also brings you English speaking, also being a non-Japanese person from appearance. I think that also gives you a good opportunity with speaking, understanding Japanese, and bringing yourself into any conversation, into any discussion, into any topic, into working through anything. People, it's easier for you to work with Japanese information as well. Disadvantages. I'm not sure. I don't see any disadvantages. I mean, speaking another language, being able to communicate and being able to benefit from different sources of information, I don't see any disadvantage there.
So you don't see the tendency that some of your Japanese colleagues or superiors are dropping off load on you, that you have to communicate to the local staff because they know, okay, I'll just let it out on them in Japanese, and then he's in charge of doing the dirty work and explaining all that in the local language. That's nothing that you experience. Okay.
No. Sometimes I see it also for other, depending on the position. Right now, I have a mission. I'm a marketing communications manager, and I have to deal with my area of that I'm responsible for. Mm-hmm. So right now, it's really not the case. I know that in Japan, working in Japan, I know that from other people also in different and bigger organizations, that if you're an English speaker, it's very easy that people, oh, it's in English, could you please take a look? So all of a sudden you get things on your table where you have nothing to do with work-wise, but people will tell you, hey, why don't you look over this? It's only 20 pages. so why don't you do this on top of things? So that happens quite often, depending on your position. Mm-hmm. That you get it from the right and the left, and but not me now being in Germany, no.
Got it. Okay, I want to shift gears just slightly, since we just briefly touched on your company, but I'd be just curious to hear about the industry that you're working in as a whole.
Yeah.
How do you see the industry in terms of electrical measuring devices or electrical measuring equipment? Is that something that is growing worldwide? Is that something that is now impacted by the pandemic, or what tendencies and what trajectory do you see there?
Business-wise, I think the pandemic itself, I think, had a certain impact because, after all, test and measurement instruments are especially demanded by the industry as investment goods. So if you want to set up a new product, if you have to invest into the development of the product, so development tests and also for production lines to ensure quality as well, but these are investment goods. And so certain budgets with big clients are frozen at the moment, project are postponed, so there is definitely a certain impact that we see. And also in regards to demonstrations, because we do not really only have things that you buy online and you just push the power button and then you go on measuring. These are rather complicated measurement tools, measurement instruments that you have to install into your process, and there's a lot of explanation necessary, and also so visits on site are not really possible with many organizations. So there is a certain impact. However, I must say, for us in Europe, we were able to keep it stable here, because I think many instruments also think like what happens in the time after the pandemic, and especially if we think of the electrification of mobility, or all kind of battery developments, battery improvements that is an ongoing topic for so many areas, for everything, for mobile devices, for mobility, for facilities as well. So everything there, people cannot really stop it. So overall, I think that these devices have to be tested, have to be reliable, have to be more efficient, And therefore, I think that our industry, test and measurement, is in demand, and we are asked to find the solutions where to contribute to finding new technologies, technology inventions. So I think for the outlook is still good, and not, if not to say, it is growing, definitely.
Interesting, because I was just reading an article about the automobile manufacturing industry recently,
Yeah.
and that some companies are struggling. Of course, there's the shift to EVs, electric vehicles.
Yeah.
But I was just curious how much you're tied to the automotive sector. But I understand it's not only measuring equipment for the automotive sector, but really for any kind of factory.
Yes, not at all. It is really the automotive industry, of course, is strong. I mean, especially in Europe, we have Germany, Italy, France. Also, these are the big industry, the big countries, the big markets where the automotive industry is very strong. However, it's from industrial manufacturing to facility management to research institutes. All these different organizations handle with electrical equipment. So yes, it's a strong factor, but it's definitely not everything.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, then allow me to shift gears again. Completely different question, more personal. What beliefs, behaviors, or habits have you implemented in your life in the, let's say, last 1 to 5 years that most positively have impacted your life?
Most positively. Okay. Well, I think number one, definitely. I mean, also in Ready to Work, it is the I find that the people management part of the job, that people, without going into micromanagement and looking on every step, every click that your teammates or subordinates are doing on the computer, but being able to guide. I find that in my experience, like with my team leaders, but that I was working under or working with, but also with myself being a leader of a team, I find this the most challenging, but also the most promising thing that you, or the most constructive thing that you can contribute to your work place and to your environment. And this is the one thing that I strongly believe in. I want myself to further improve there, to become better in this, because I find this the chemistry at work, and also that is a lot of influence also on the efficiency and how we work together on the teamwork. That is really a very important thing.
Got it. Okay. And I think that's something that might be a bit difficult to answer, but we talked about so many challenges and differences between Japanese business styles and Western business styles.
Yeah.
If there was one thing that you could change, let's say you have a magic wand and you can change one thing about doing business with Japan, what would that be?
Changing business with Japan, I think it would be it's basically, I think, what I said, to knowing the when to argue strongly and when to hold back, and in a more leaning towards the arguing strongly. I know that in Japan, the perception of the foreigner for a long decade, probably coming from the 80s onwards, is having a US business person who wants to expand quickly on the Japanese market, and therefore says like, okay, I want this, I want this, I want that, and so 2 months, and then we get it done. And those very demanding and very strong requests at the first meeting, for example, I mean, that is something that somehow also an image in the Japanese mindset, where you say, oh, the foreigners, they're all like that. And so I think you have to be careful. But on the other hand, what I would change, probably if I go back, I would also be demanding, but it has to be in a balance. So that balance is really a very important aspect. So yes, so I would like to have this for myself. I was probably on the other side of the approach. going to observing first, and then go over to this is what I can really request and enforce. And yeah, but that is something that I think is very important. I would like to address.
I understand. Mm-hmm. Good. And let's imagine, for example, there is a company that would like to do business with Hioki. Imagine there's a supplier that says, we might have the right product or service for Hioki, and they would like to do business as a vendor or maybe even as a business partner. They're looking for a joint venture partner. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give such a non-Japanese company that is wanting to do business with a Japanese company in general, maybe more specific with the company that you're working at right now?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I mean, apart from, of course, the general approach that you have, of course, you have your facts ready, your outlook ready, and probably know about the markets, that you have a bit of a specific expectation. Many new business models, many new business ideas or opportunities in Japanese companies require, I think, the background information. Like it's obvious. It's not something specific for Japan, but bringing that specifically to the table, being able to set up, this I already looked up for the Japanese market. This is what I would like to do. This is how I would like to implement, or how I imagine it to implement it. Without being really too demanding there, but really having this specific ideas on what you are proposing to Hioki or to other companies. That is, I think, I wouldn't say to take the new business partner by the hand, but to have this idea with a good, not too strong and not too demanding guidance, not too demanding tone, but a guidance there. And that is, I think, the good way to get into a positive business relationship. And also be a bit patient, because I don't think that we talked about Ringi Seido, and decision making in Japan is not something people don't shoot from the hip. It takes a while. It takes 1 or 2 meetings to go into that. That is also something, be a bit patient there. It's not something, nothing that's decided overnight.
It's really valuable insight. So I can say that my key takeaways are really to be prepared, know what your offer is, and then present your offer, but don't be too pushy.
Yeah.
And then at the end, or maybe even present the offer and ask questions. What do you think about it? Do you think that would be possible? Is that a good idea for the Japanese market?
Yes.
And then last but not least, to be patient in the reply from the other party, because obviously they might say, yes, it's a good idea, but we have to check.
Yes.
And there won't be a decision.
You will definitely hear this. You will definitely hear this. No doubt about this. Mm-hmm. So we have to be patient, and maybe even, of course, it's always good to set a deadline, to set a target, but don't set it too strict, because that may result in may backfire.
That's also a good point. So really, to make it more tangible, when your Japanese business partners say, yes, but we have to check. Oh, okay, I understand. Until when do you think you will check?
That is
leave them up to them. Leave it up to them to make the decision, and not say, okay, I'll set up a follow-up call in 1 week.
If you do so, please, I would put it as a question.
Okay.
Of course, I would like, hey, what about, in 2 weeks of time? Mm-hmm. Or rather, no. I mean, it depends on how. Maybe not on the first date, on the first meeting.
So it's good. Yes, a meeting is kind of like a date. It's a business date, if you want to call it like that. Yes.
Right.
Very good. Oliver, thank you so much. I think that has been very valuable. If people want to know more about you, where can they find you on social media or on the web?
Yes, I'm in LinkedIn. The usual suspects. I'm in LinkedIn. That's probably it. LinkedIn. That's my main, really, as also business-wise, in the B2B industry. The other social media are not that much that much used for us. So yeah, LinkedIn would be the place.
And that's Oliver, Oliver, and then Witte, Witte, right?
That's right. That's me.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Oliver, again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. This has been the Japan Business Show. See you all next time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.